So get this, in 1971, Paul McCartney walked onto a London courtroom. He had just done the unthinkable, filed suit to break up the Beatles. This is the story of how one broke musician from Liverpool hijacked pop music forever.
That kind of way, I always used to think of it. I used to think, well, that's very clever, all that stuff.
He was born into a modest Liverpool home. Jim McCartney was a local musician. Mary was a nurse. Life was simple until 1956, when Paul was just 14. His mother died after surgery complications. The teenager lost his world in an instant. He poured himself into music, grabbed his brother's guitar, and began teaching himself the chords. Here's the thing that blows my mind. He learned left-handed, playing the guitar completely upside down by his own design. A year later, fate brought John Lennon to him. They met at church fete in Woolton in 1957. Paul was in awe of John's swagger. John was intrigued by Paul's musical ideas. They found they could finish each other's songs. Together, they vowed to make it big. But in these early years, they played dark pubs and rough clubs in Hamburg. One early promoter booked the group and only 15 people showed up. The band kept at it, dreaming of stardom. Paul, the scrappy kid from Liverpool, had nothing, but he had driven. What he didn't know was that this partnership would eventually destroy him. Now, a very relevant question just come to your mind. What exactly happened? Well, let's find out. By 1962, everything changed. The Beatles exploded into the scene like a hurricane. Ed Sullivan, screaming fans, global domination overnight. And if you're loving this journey into music history, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe. It keeps us bringing you more stories behind legends like Paul McCartney. Now, let's find out what really happened behind the scenes before the destruction. In one US tour, police had to hold back thousands of girls at the airport. An early promoter once recalled the chaos. Girls were beginning to overwhelm us. It was absolute pandemonium. Paul was at the heart of the storm, and he was fearless. From Please Please Me to Rubber Soul, no one matched their genius. Then came Revolver in 1966 and Sgt. Pepper's in 1967, albums that turned pop music on its ear. Here's what most people don't know. Sgt. Pepper's was mostly Paul's creation. He co-wrote or wrote 9 of the 13 songs on it. On stage, on record, Paul and the band ruled everything. Hit after hit, record after record broken. By 1967, they were bigger than Elvis, but behind the smiles, cracks were already forming. And what happened next would tear apart the greatest band in history. In 1968, everything fell apart. John and Yoko retreated into artistic experiments. George felt overlooked. Paul increasingly became the boss of the studio sessions. After manager Brian Epstein died in 1967, Paul took on a controlling role, keeping everyone working. He was a perfectionist. He gave orders. Sessions grew tense. Even years later, Paul confessed, "I'm scared of me being the boss. I don't get any support." John hated it, and he struck back mercilessly. Meanwhile, business imploded. Paul warned privately that Alan Klein, their new manager, was a con man. John, George, and Ringo wanted Klein. Paul wanted him fired. It led to a showdown that would define pop history. On April 10, 1970, Paul shocked the world. He announced the band was over and rushed to legalize it in court. "I had to sue the band," he said later. The world had turned on him. Paul McCartney, once the golden boy of pop, was now painted as the villain. The press dragged him through the mud. Headlines call him the man who broke up the Beatles. Fans jeered. He and Linda were mocked as selfish, fake, washed up. Was Paul McCartney truly the reason the Beatles fell apart? Or was he just an easy target for a world that needed someone to blame? Don't worry, story's not over yet. In 1971, Lennon dropped How Do You Sleep? A brutal track, a line that hit like a punch. The only thing you did was yesterday. Paul was crushed. He couldn't believe John would go that far. He said later, "No man, it felt like the end of everything. His band, his friends, his legacy." At that moment, Paul felt like it was time for a powerful comeback, yet he chose not to respond or defend himself in interviews. In 1970, he married Linda and formed Wings. Critics laughed. The shows were half full, and the songs were called weak. People said he was finished, but Paul kept pushing. Then, in 1973, he released Band on the Run. No press storm, no hype, just the music. It exploded. The album hit #1. Every track landed. Pop, rock, soul, energy. Suddenly critics changed their tune. Paul wasn't a fallen star anymore. He was back, and this time, he didn't need the Beatles. Suddenly, Wings felt unstoppable. Band on the Run became a classic, topping charts on both sides of the Atlantic. Here's the data that matters. Every Wings single from the mid-70s hit #1 in the US. By 1977, Paul scored the best-scoring single in British history with Full of Kintyre, over 2 million copies, surpassing the Beatles' own She Loves You. The man who was called Judas was now outselling his former bandmates. By the late 1970s, Wings had 6 albums at #1 in the US and 3 in the UK. Paul had won back respect the hard way, with relentless hits and sold-out stadiums tours. But critics weren't done with him yet. The feud with John continued to play out in public. Paul had taken subtle shots at Lennon in songs like Too Many People, which insiders understood as aimed at John's political idealism. Lennon struck back harder in How Do You Sleep, calling Paul every name in the book. So what about our critics? Critics were just as vicious. When Paul released Ram in 1971, Rolling Stone magazine dismissed it as an atrocity. His early solo work was tagged as lightweight pop. Reviewers laughed at his love ballads and mocked his soft image. They called him soft, said his music was too sweet. Critics mocked the melodies, saying real artists didn't write love songs. Paul McCartney wasn't serious enough, not dangerous, not rock and roll. But the numbers told another story. One by one, his singles climbed the charts. Maybe I'm Amazed, Band on the Run, Jet. Every release is a statement. Every hit is a reminder. Paul wasn't chasing trends. He was the trend. By the time the 70s ended, he outsold almost everyone. Billboard crowned him and Lennon the most successful songwriting duo of all time. Guinness certified his record sales. Then Grammys followed. 21 awards, hundreds of millions of albums. Did his accomplishments end there? Not at all. Some of his greatest achievements were still to come. So stay sharp and don't get too amazed. In the 80s, he linked up with Stevie Wonder and Michael Jackson. Topped the charts again. Merged generations. Rock, R&B, pop. Paul blurred the lines, and even the Bond theme hit hard. Then in 2015, he did it again. Quietly appeared on 4 or 5 Seconds with Rihanna and Kanye West. No fanfare, just music. And then the internet lost it. Who is Paul McCartney went viral. They thought he was new, but the truth was simple. He never left. Paul didn't adapt to pop. He rewired it. Today, Paul McCartney's legacy is unassailable. The stats tell the whole story. 32 Billboard #1 hits, more than anyone in history, dozens of platinum albums, songwriting credits across 6 decades. By the late 1970s, he sold over 200 million records. Now, he's easily tripled that. 21 Grammys, a knighthood, Hall of Fame inductions, and at 82, Sir Paul still packs stadiums worldwide. Now, you might ask, was it really necessary for Paul and John to be in the same boat to reach great heights? Well, Paul itself gave the answer. Every note echoed his journey from broke teenager to the world's greatest pop champion. In the end, while his rivals faded into history, Paul kept writing hits, kept filling stadiums, kept proving that sometimes the villain of the story was the hero all along. Was Paul McCartney the villain who killed the Beatles, or the genius who saved pop forever? If you think his story isn't over yet, like, share, and hit subscribe because legends don't fade, they just write the next verse.